Hey, there you are. No, I was looking for you actually. I have a few ideas I want to run by you for the next video. I was actually thinking another countdown, but something a little less expected. You know, everyone sees Mecha Godzilla coming, everyone knows King Ghidorah, everyone does that. Something new, something fresh, so let's run it by you. I was thinking a countdown, ready? A countdown of kaiju who have space in their title. No, space like outer space in their name, in their moniker. Well, there's Space Godzilla, but his movie kind of sucks. Then there's Space Gauss, and his movie also sucks. Yeah, yeah, I didn't. No, you're right. I didn't think that one through. Okay, I think you're going to be really jazzed about this idea. A countdown of all the films to feature, wait for it, Space Gauss. Okay, and for the countdown of Space Gauss, we have at number one, Gamera versus Giran. I really like Space Gauss. Yeah, yeah. Now that I'm doing the math in my head, and you carry the seven, it doesn't, it won't make for a very good countdown. You know what? Scratch it from the list. We had somebody request a countdown of Rodan. What do you think of that? I'm so sorry to have offended you. You know what? I'll just go get the countdown done. How about I'll get to work? Yeah. No, you have a good one. Good talk, sir. Good talk. Good talk. Now I'm a fan of Rodan, so I'll tell you the plan. Drop opinions so bright, leave you with a tan, leave you extra crispy, and you too won't miss me, cause I know this fucking kaiju like the back of my hand. Good evening, kaiju fans. The Kaijuologist returns. We got a fresh countdown for you guys this evening. I had a request, and it was a happy request. We're going to be doing a countdown of the top films to feature Rodan. Rodan happens to be one of my personal favorite kaiju, so I'm more than happy to oblige this person's request. As the case with the other countdowns, this will not be a countdown necessarily of my favorite films to feature Rodan. This will be a countdown of the films that I think give us the most interesting Rodan, take the most time with Rodan, really give you an opportunity to sink your teeth into this kaiju. So, no further interruptions or jokes, let's get to it. So number 6, I think, is only fair to hit up Godzilla Final Wars. Now, if you've been following my channel, you know I'm not exactly the biggest advocate for this film. That's okay, some people love it. Great, good for you. That said, this is not a movie where necessarily any of the kaiju, maybe outside Godzilla, are allowed any time to shine. And that's really the problem here. I will give this team credit. Rodan, this is the only chance Rodan gets to shine in the Millennium series at all. So good for them for remembering this kaiju. And Rodan honestly does get a little more of a showcase than a lot of the kaiju do. The destruction of New York City, actually for a film that is now like 12 years old, really not bad, and probably the best look that they've ever put on Rodan's supersonic boom attack since the 50s. So I'll give them some points here. The real tragedy, though, is Rodan, especially in the Showa period, is like a Titan fighter. Like he brings a good melee battle. And in this film, he's up against Godzilla along with two other monsters. You have Anguirus and King Caesar, and Godzilla just wipes all three of them out in no time flat. It's like a minute and a half battle that ends with some cheesy football joke, which in Japanese, cultural context is probably awesome and hilarious, but really it's a disservice to Rodan, who was a pretty good adversary for Godzilla in the day. And even when he's on a team of two other kaiju, he can't hold his own for a minute. Like, fuck you, movie. Rodan deserved better. Anguirus deserved better. King Caesar deserved better. But certainly Rodan did. So that quickly pulls us into number 5, Destroy All Monsters. It's kind of hard, really, debating between these two films. At least with Destroy All Monsters, though, Rodan is there. He's in some of the opening shots of the movie. He's part of the giant invasion on Tokyo. He's one of the first monsters you see destroying a city on the international stage. He's there when the Kilaaks send the monsters to attack the military outside of Mount Fuji. He's there for the final battle. He is there for every big action centerpiece in this movie. He also plays kind of a fun part in the introduction of Monster Island, right? We get to see him fishing, like he goes and he catches a dolphin out of the water to eat. So we get kind of a sense of the ecosystem of Monster Island, which is just kind of a fun little gritty detail for the fan base that really gives you the sense of Monster Island being something more than just a cheap movie plot point. And I mean, this also, I think, in the long term helps solidify Rodan as one of the central Toho kaiju. If you bring up Monster Island outside of your usual kaiju fan base, a lot of people will go, oh, Godzilla lives there and his friends. I think Mothra and Rodan are there. And I think the movie does kind of help elevate Rodan in that way. His suit isn't great in Destroy All Monsters. Some of his props are a little flimsy. But you do get some fresh footage of Rodan, especially the invasion of Tokyo. There's some actual good shots of him and some nice city destruction sequences with him too, which is the last time you get of that in the Showa period. So locking it in at number 5, Destroy All Monsters. Get it, Rodan. Okay, number 4. This is probably the point where, certain members of the fan base are going to pour themselves a chalice of haterade, and by all means, go for it. This wasn't an easy pick. I'm going to hit up at number 4. We're going to do Invasion of Astro Monster. I know, but bear with me. As I explained at the top of this, I'm doing a countdown of the movies that really focus on Rodan and want to pay tribute to his character. And Invasion of Astro Monster is, by any way you qualify it, one of the crowning achievements of the golden era of kaiju, which for me is like 1954 to about like 65, 66, maybe 68 for pushing it into Warp Gargantuas. That said, Invasion of Astro Monster is not a movie that is all that interested in its kaiju. None of them. King Ghidorah, Godzilla, Rodan. It is a plot that has much more to do with aliens and human interaction, which is a fun, it creates a really fun science fiction film, even kind of verging into space opera on some levels. But you could transplant the kaiju with, a plot device about, how about like chemical germ warfare? We're being attacked by aliens. We need to borrow your germs. Now we're using your germs against you. You see how easy that was? How about nuclear proliferation? We need to borrow your nukes to fight the aliens. Now we're using your nukes against you. You could have swapped the kaiju out and still had a decent science fiction movie. That said, we're glad the monsters are there because it adds to the fun of it, and you get a battle in outer space. How cool is that? The problem still being, though, the film, I mean, most people know the film as Godzilla versus Monster Zero, right? Even Monster Zero himself is just a prop to the aliens. King Ghidorah has very little to do with the actual plot, and then it's like the last 2.5 minutes of the movie where the monsters wake up out of their alien-induced coma and are like, "Oh, yeah, we're monsters. I guess we should fight." The movie isn't interested in King Ghidorah. It's not that interested in Godzilla, and unfortunately, it's really not interested in Rodan. Now, the Rodan suit is a significant improvement from where it was in Ghidra the Three-Headed Monster. Gotta give some props there. Some of the battles, I mean, I brought up Battle in Outer Space is awesome. Love it, folks. But also some of the destruction sequence and like some of the more rural parts of Japan is pretty fun, is good looking, and Rodan is not ignored. Rodan is not completely ignored in this invasion plot once we get to the part where the monsters are turned loose on the humans. You do get some fun shots of Rodan. You get some fun. I think there is still stock footage from the original Rodan snuck in there, but there's also some original stuff they pull off from the special effects department. It's a fantastic film. I mean, every kaiju fan has ample reason to love this movie, but at the end of the day, it's a movie where the monsters are very much like kind of side props to the actual plot of the film. And that's kind of a rare treat, actually, that you have a kaiju film where the human element is just as interesting, if not more so, than the kaiju element. All right, here we are, number three. And holy cow, this is the third video YouTube clip now where I'm talking about this freaking movie. I'm sick to death of this freaking movie. If you really need a detailed explanation, by all means, go watch my last two videos. But at number three, we're bringing in Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2. You know, if I ever enjoyed this movie, I might not anymore. I've had to talk about it way too much. That said, in a countdown of Rodan, you're remiss to ignore this one. It is really the last time a filmmaker really put some effort into this kaiju. And there's plenty of debate about how successful that effort was. And I definitely lean more into my Showa Rodan, but I will give credit where credit's due here. Rodan is not ignored through this movie. Rodan gets a few really good looking special effect shots, and it's a rare instance where a kaiju's character and personality genuinely evolves just within the film. We're not talking about the Heisei period, we're talking about just in this film. There is a subtle evolution and arc to Rodan. Well, literally an evolution. We get the preposterous Fire Rodan, who has a purple laser beam out of the blue. I don't know. I always kind of wondered if that was supposed to be a cheeky reference to like the weird mist spray thing that inexplicably pops out of the blue in the 1956 original film. Rodan fans, you know what I'm talking about here. You know what I'm talking about. It said Fire Rodan. Why? Just Rodan wasn't fully killed. He comes back to life. It could have been an easy plot point, but no. Now he's bright red and he shoots lasers because it's the Heisei period. Everyone shoots lasers. Oh God! If you really need to talk about Rodan in this movie again, I have two other videos where we go more into it, but I will acknowledge this film at least seemed to want to try and do this kaiju justice. And as far as monsters in the Heisei arc, it's hard to ignore the significance of Rodan. This timeline for Godzilla would be dead without this Rodan. This Rodan gives himself, very literally, turns into magical Sailor Moon dust and saves our dead Godzilla from being dead. So, yeah, again, there's plenty to debate on the film. I've talked about it too much. But if I'm talking about films that really pay attention to Rodan, this film pays a lot of attention to this kaiju. I'll give 10 points right now to anyone who can guess the way the rest of this countdown's gonna go. Alright, so our next obvious one, we gotta hit up Ghidra the Three-Headed Monster. Am I right? Yeah, I'm right. Oh my god. I should just suck it up and review this film. I hit this one off. This was my number one for King Ghidorah as well. Well, this is number two for Rodan. But this is just it's hard really to overstate how influential this film is in the canon of kaiju. It's not just Toho, it's not just Godzilla. The entire genre reacts and responds and has to deal with what this film accomplished. And one of the best things it accomplished is it really started to unify a a kaiju universe of Toho that Toho had been setting up. I'm not sure if they planned it this way. It's funny actually. There were like some memes and some cute Facebook posts going on around the time the first Avengers film came out, and then it comes up again when Ultron came out. That Toho kind of beat Marvel to this whole idea of we do a bunch of separate movies, and then the characters converge for one big battle. Now, mind you, Destroy All Monsters is usually the one they're talking about, but really, Ghidra, the three-headed monster, is the more important film in that discussion. It's what sets up Destroy All Monsters. And the biggest click being, the biggest adjustment here is the inclusion of Rodan. It's one thing to introduce a new kaiju in Ghidra. We've already done that before. Uh, Also, Mothra has already been in a film with Godzilla, so we already know there's a crossover there. But now Rodan, a film, I mean, gosh, that film's almost 9 years old by the time we're in production for Ghidra the Three-Headed Monster. I mean, that actually threw me when I saw Invasion of Astro Monster the first time. I was already familiar with the film Rodan. And so the whole time they're talking about this monster Rodan in the movie, I'm like, what? Like, is it the pterodactyl monster? Is it that other weird movie I saw like a year ago? Really? And then when it was, I'm like, I had no idea these movies cross over that way. And that's what this film established. Now, in terms of the character of Rodan, we get to establish, we really broaden his character and personality. Um, for one thing, we have not gone to see this kaiju yet interact with any other kaiju. And we find out very quickly that Rodan's kind of he's kind of a badass, and he's also kind of a prickly motherfucker, right? Like the second he comes across Godzilla, he chases Godzilla. Like their battle is, I mean, it's almost like 20 minutes long, and it starts in the ocean when they first run into each other, and then they walk through the city just kind of glowering at each other, and then finally they're out like in the valley and onto Mount Fuji, and they're still just pissed as hell. It's some pretty fun melee battles. It also sets up a Rodan as a kaiju who really holds his own against Godzilla. I mean, Godzilla hits him full on in the face with the radioactive atomic ray breath, and nothing. Rodan's like, "Oh, that sucked, but I'm still ready to fight." This movie came out the same year as another movie where Godzilla does that attack on Mothra, and Mothra goes up in flames and dies. Rodan's down for the bat. He's down for it. He wants to bring it. And if it weren't for Mothra and Ghidra kind of interrupting their fight, who knows actually who would win this in the context of the Showa period? Who's going to take this battle? I don't know. They're pretty evenly matched, which is fun. Um, but it broadens him too, that now he slowly evolves into an ally for Godzilla. He works with Mothra as well. So, I mean, and this is one of those hard things with this film. This film sets up so many trends, and one of the trends you could hate on this film for is the anthropomorphization. They start to humanize the monsters. The one thing, and I actually did debate for a while, he doesn't look very good in this film. I kind of thought about like, do I have to mark the film lower because of that? I think the character work here and the significance of what this does to the whole kaiju genre easily makes up for some of the blemishes occurring in this film. Now, for some reason, they got really excited in this production about like shoulder, neck, head puppets, and every single one of Rodan. I mean, there's like I think three I can think of just off the top of my head. They look terrible. They don't look like even the Rodan suit we're mostly using. They are a far, far cry from how good he looked in the 50s, but they just look obviously fake in a way that nothing in Mothra versus Godzilla looked, nothing in Invasion of Astro Monster looks, nothing in a lot of the Showa period doesn't suffer. I think this is probably where you see the production scars of getting this film out in the same year as Mothra versus Godzilla. The Godzilla suit's looking a little funny, and they do the same thing with him. They give him these weird puppet prosthetic parts to get the like heads. Like here's Rodan's head, here's Godzilla's head, and it just looks preposterous. I don't know why they didn't cut it or redo something else. Probably timing and budget. Um, so I'm not actually a big fan of how Rodan looks in this movie. I'm gonna overlook that for the rest of the argument about just what it does to help him solidify him as a major player in the Toho universe and a cultural icon in general. But I mean, the film in general is just such a monumental achievement and such a revolution within the idea of how you tackle a kaiju film. I think we can forgive a few bad Rodan puppets because Lord knows we're still dealing with them in 1993. So we'll forgive 1964. How about? And now, my kaiju friends and family, we've reached number one. What could it be? What could it be? I guess. Oh, yeah, it must be the original Rodan. Yeah, goddamn right, it's the original Rodan. This was actually the first just film on its own I reviewed when I started this channel almost a year ago now. We're getting close. Now we're almost into March. The original Rodan is it's just such a damn good movie, and it introduces this kaiju who later goes on to play much larger roles and become his own character. But you know, Toho didn't know that making this first film, and you really got to respect the company. They did not cut corners here. They did not um, shirk off of this kaiju. I think they really did tackle most of this film, every step of the preparation, and the expectation being that this kaiju is going to be as big, if not bigger, than Godzilla. And interestingly, if someone can correct me if you found another source, I remember reading the original Rodan actually here in America was financially more successful than Godzilla King of the Monsters. Not necessarily because the box office was so much higher, so much more profitable, but because the American dub doesn't add scenes, didn't have to hire a C-list actor like Raymond Burr, and they didn't have to go back and reshoot a bunch of stuff. They put in some weird stock footage of like nuclear tests at the beginning, but for the most part, they were just hiring actors to do dubbing. One of those, if I think I have this correct, was young George Takei. I knew I loved this movie for a reason. This was one of the first kaiju films I'd ever seen, and to this day, I adore this film. But really, when we're talking about Rodan, Rodan never. I've said it 100 times. I'll say it 100 more times before I'm dead. He never looks as good as he does in this first film. The coloring, the suit design, and the special effects, the way they handle him. There's some absolute criticisms to be thrown in, but in general, for 1956, for the first color kaiju film Toho tackles, for a flying kaiju who's not just can't just be a suit that walks through models, he has to land, he has to take off, and then there's another Rodan out of the blue. It's an incredibly ambitious film that to this day holds up beautifully. It is my some of my personal favorite special effect work by Subaraya. Akira Ifukube knocks it out. I mean, everything about this movie is just you. If you are a kaiju fan, you cannot miss this movie. It's that good. I can't recommend it enough. And it is the inception point for this kaiju. But more importantly, it's not as a solo adventure where we're just focusing on one kaiju. They do a remarkably good job of adding depth to these monsters, adding tragedy to these monsters. They are simultaneously in their design very menacing looking and also kind of sympathetic. You can't help but kind of feel terrible, and you feel the lonesomeness and the pain and the confusion of this monster. It's stunning top to bottom. I can't praise the original Rodan enough. It is absolutely one of my favorites. And thus Rodan is and is always going to hold a really special place in my heart. Now we all understand Legendary is apparently ready to tackle this monster and throw him into their circus. I hope to God they're up for the task and they know what they're doing. You know what? If how they handled 2014 Godzilla, that reboot, if that's any indication, then I'm pretty happy and comfortable. I trust what they'll do with Rodan, but um, yeah, Rodan, one of my favorites. If I ever have the ball someday to do a countdown of my favorite kaiju, it's gonna be a really ugly slugfest. Probably between him and Mothra, be the toughest. Well, hey guys, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for listening. By all means, give me your countdown. Tell me what you think. Uh, Requests, comments, all of it, any of it. Chalices of haterade. Bring it my way. I love it all. I'm gonna be signing off from Denver, Colorado. We're the Mile High City. We're getting higher all the time. Huh? No, what'd you say? What? Of course I'm not wearing underwear. Wasn't that the whole point of me wearing a dress?